So good morning, everyone. Absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you to Peter. Thank you to Fred Kent, who is here. I want to talk about the rise of innovation districts. I want to talk about the interplay of innovation in the 21st century and the placemaking. And this is really critical because, as you heard before, cities are the engines of national economies. And the innovative sectors, the sort of R&D, tech-fueled advanced manufacturing and advanced services sectors are the engines of urban and metropolitan economies. So it's really important to see where the innovative economy is going and how it's affecting cities. And so let me talk about just not ancient history, but a little more modern history, though that was absolutely fascinating. Here's what I think is the evolution of innovative sector placemaking in at least the mature economies. Industrial districts, late 19th century, earliest 20th century, Northern Europe, Northern England, Midwest of the United States, manufacturing essentially enmeshed in the urban fabric. Post-Cold War, research parks, Silicon Valley, Research Triangle Park, essentially far away, isolated campuses, whether they're national labs, whether they're corporate firms, but away from others, keep your secret secret. And finally, innovation districts. The collapse back of the innovative economy to essentially the cores of, in a minimum, US, European, Canadian, perhaps Australian cities, beginnings of this effort outside. Just listen to this quickly.
The geography of innovation is shifting. To find the innovative economy 20 years ago, a worker needed to drive to a secluded research park, work in isolation, and keep ideas secret. Today, proximity is everything. Workers want to be in urban places that are walkable, bikeable, hyper-caffeinated, where they can bump into other workers and share ideas. Firms also want to be close to other firms, research labs, and universities in collaborative spaces so that smart ideas can be turned into smart products for the market. Innovation districts are this century's productive geography. They are both competitive places and cool spaces, and they will transform your city and metropolis.
So two things to take from that. First, I grew up on Saturday morning cartoons. If you can't animate it, it's not worth talking about. But, you know, your typical American hyperbolic claim about the future of the universe. So here is at least a starting definition, and with Fred's help and Project for Public Spaces, beginning to rethink some of this definition. But we really started observing this trend of the collapse back of the innovative economy around our advanced research institutions, our medical campuses, the mashup of startups and entrepreneurs and investors, all in an urban fabric that's sort of connected by transit and wired and so forth. We really saw initially three kinds of models emerging. The first, fairly classic, right? Anchor institution led, think MIT, Kendall Square, think essentially Case Western or Cleveland Clinic around University Circle in Cleveland. Many examples, particularly in the United States, given where our advanced institutions are located. In the hot markets, Seattle, San Francisco, Boston, New York, what happens is as real estate prices sort of heat up around these anchor institutions, the innovative economy sort of jumps out to underutilized land, generally around waterfronts, generally former industrial spaces. And then the reason you know this is really happening is if you go to Research Triangle Park or other science parks in the United States, they're beginning to urbanize, right? Because they're competing for talented workers and innovative firms in the downtowns that are relatively near these places, so they think they need a different kind of placemaking. So let's deconstruct this a little, because I think this is quite different from what we've seen, at least in the United States, for quite some time. These districts are essentially the amalgam of three kinds of assets: economic, physical, and networking. And when you have a risk-taking culture, it essentially results in an innovation ecosystem. Let's start with the physical, the economic assets. This is Drexel University in University City in Philadelphia. You fall out of your Acela train in 30th Street Station. You're on the Drexel campus. Excellent sort of market engineering-oriented university. What you begin to see are firms just want to be near the secret sauce, right? The talented workers, the ideas. This is a high-value, research-oriented firm. This one is actually in St. Louis, Cofactor Genomics. A lot of life science companies, startups, wanting to be near these kind of universities. The creative field. This is a video gaming company in Philadelphia. Again, wanting to be close to the campus, right? For the young entrepreneurs, the ideas that get commercialized. And finally, even small batch manufacturing. Yes, we still make things in the United States, but with the rise of 3D printing, other technological advancements, what you're beginning to see are small companies. This is a company called Artaic. That's a robot called Artie, right? Making ceramics for hotels like this with maybe 12 designers in the front office, a robot in the middle, and 10 folks dealing with marketing and distribution. Manufacturing can happen in cities, dense cities. So let's talk about physical, because this is really critical and it's shifting even as we speak. The first part of physical, we've all learned this from Fred and others, is the public space being animated, right? The energy, the vibrancy, the vitality, right? And how that affects innovation. That's Barcelona on the left, Detroit in the middle, right? Whatever you think about Detroit, just hopefully you'll walk away with something different, because Detroit is rising again, renewing itself from the core. And Eindhoven, which calls itself the most innovative city in the world in Holland. Public space, acting sort of for that bump and mingle effect of people. Space is changing inside facilities. Co-working space, space that is essentially organized, choreographed for collisions between people. Very, very different. This is District Hall in Boston Seaport, the self-proclaimed innovation district in Boston, built with concessions from developers, meeting place, most importantly, a bar. So again, we can sort of fuel the creative process or perhaps suppress it, depending on which alcohol you're drinking. This is Stockholm. This is fairly typical, right, of 20th century urban building, the freeway right through the center of city, separating out many innovative assets. The notion, let's deck over the freeway or deck over rail, as they did in Barcelona, so we can create high-valued spaces, again, for innovative purposes. And then the other piece about physical, which is not necessarily in the actual innovation hubs, are these public markets, these very organic entrepreneurial communities. You see Automobile Alley in Oklahoma City, Pike Place in Seattle, Reading Terminal in Philly, a sort of a walk away from where the innovative activity is happening. But if you ask workers in the innovative spaces why they like being where they are, whether it's University City in Philadelphia or the medical district in Oklahoma City, it's because they're close to these very vibrant places. So the geography of these districts can expand out. Last bit, networking. And my daughter hates this picture because she's a research scientist. And this literally is a picture of Eindhoven, right? Not very diverse, but these are strong ties between people from essentially the same guild, the same discipline, the same expertise, the same experience, right? Sharing their knowledge. None of us would probably be able to understand what any of these people are talking about, because it's the language of tech, it's the language of engineering. But this is really what makes innovation districts critical and sort of synergistic. It's weak ties. It's people from different disciplines, different backgrounds, being able to connect together, right? Whether it's someone with that idea from the market connecting with someone who understands marketing, with someone who understands design. That's what makes these districts so powerful. So innovation ecosystems, again, this is a radically different spatial geography. Because in the United States, literally 10 years ago, if you said to someone, where is the innovative economy? You would say, get in your car if you were in a downtown and start driving and don't stop. It's collapsing back. And many of these districts are literally 2 or 3 or 5 blocks away from some of the poorest neighborhoods we have in the United States. So the innovative economy has the potential to be inclusive if we're smart and intentional and purposeful, and has the ability to be sustainable because of repopulation and the innovation that's happening. So let's just go really quickly to Philadelphia. Jeannie's here, so she could get up and give the speech. But this is University City. We are seeing enormous growth in the downtowns and our midtowns of American cities. This shows you the growth in residential and jobs within the last decade. This is Center City, the downtown. To some extent, the lines between the downtowns and the midtowns are blurring now because of the way companies and people operate, live, work, and play. You have to have a Google map. I mean, if you're going to come to a conference on placemaking, here's the requisite Google map. It even moves. So here's downtown and midtown Philly. And this is where you begin to see the concentration of those core economic assets, right? The gift that keeps on giving. Advanced research institutions with large amounts of research and development, either coming from the national government or corporations. A whole bunch of institutions congregate and co-locate around these places, both historically, but also even more today, as people understand the innovative effect of co-location. There's your transit, both the local and regional transit system, but also the Northeast Corridor, what we call fast rail, which you call slow rail, which links Philadelphia to Wilmington, D.C., and New York. And finally, these co-working spaces, these incubators, these accelerators, these concentrators, which essentially are sort of extracting ideas out of advanced research universities for the market. So how do you start an innovation district or build on one? First is to recognize that innovation districts, like cities, are not governments. They are networks, stakeholders from corporate, civic, labor, environmental, a whole different bunch of different groups. Very rarely a mayor is able to really drive an innovation district. That's what happened in Boston, but Boston is not really reflective of most parts of the United States or the rest of the world, such a hot market. Sometimes you have one nonprofit or even for-profit entity that essentially is running the district, like Research Triangle Park in Raleigh-Durham. But most of the times it's just pure chaos, right? I mean, you just have a lot of different stakeholders, whether they're universities, whether they're hospitals, whether they're companies, large, big, small, investors, that now need to work together, to collaborate, to compete, right, within a particular space. So that's primarily what's going on, and Philadelphia is a great example of that. The second piece, the sign of an educated person is to be deeply moved by statistics, right? So figure out who you are and do it on purpose. That means you have to audit your assets. We're just beginning to audit our assets with Project for Public Space's help. There's lots of different ways you can audit economic assets. We very much are focusing on what portion of your employment is not in large institutions, but small and medium-sized companies, right? I mean, startups in particular. Some of these districts, like Kendall Square right by MIT, a lot of startup activity, less so in Philadelphia. That's something to think about. Physical assets, you can look at broadband connectivity, you could look at transit stops, you could look at land utilization. The key is not to come up with a lot of different metrics, but to try to hone what are those physical assets that lead to quality and connectivity. And finally, networking. Frankly, in networking, the question is, how many late-night places can you go and get something to eat? Because if you're talking about the innovative economy, we're not talking 9 to 5, right? I mean, we're talking about 24/7 that has the amenities to basically fuel the idea generation process. So that's how you audit your assets, and essentially different places have different starting points. They need different kind of strategies. St. Louis, very interesting. I mean, that's where you have Washington University, botanical gardens, a lot of deep traction in food science. They create a district in between 5 different anchor institutions, and they bring in Tech Shop from the West Coast, Cambridge Innovation Center, to help sort of set off the innovative process. Detroit, what Project for Public Spaces and others have done within the downtown to animate Campus Martius, this wonderful park in the middle of downtown Detroit, is incredible. and is very much why the tech scene in downtown Detroit is so lively and entrepreneurial. Inclusion, Drexel University, relatively short hop to the Mantua neighborhood, one of the poorest, most deprived neighborhoods in Philadelphia. How do you connect innovation and inclusion? Lots of different ideas around jobs and education and skills and broadband. And finally, money. I'm from America, right? Money, capital. Interesting efforts in Detroit and elsewhere to unlock local capital. Wealthy individuals, philanthropy, corporations, universities with large balance sheets. How do you unlock capital for entrepreneurial activity and other activities that build the districts? So again, hyperbolic statement, the new geography of innovation, hopefully for innovative, inclusive, and sustainable reasons. This is the kind of innovative geography we'll build in the 21st century. Thank you very much.